Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and today's exclusive bonus features episode is all about Christopher Nolan, who just celebrated his 50th birthday a few weeks ago, and who has a new movie, Tenet, in theaters. Yes, in theaters for the first time in many, many months. We actually have a reason to go back to the movies. And I am very excited to have Brandon Siri on the podcast today to talk about Chris Nolan's career. How are we doing, Brandon?
Hey, good to see you, Brian. Yeah, no, we went to a real life movie theater yesterday and it felt right.
Yeah,
Felt good.
it was not very crowded.
No, it's funny. I drove by Home Depot today and I thought there's more people in that one Home Depot at any given second when they're open today than was in that movie theater probably the whole day. It's people should go out to a movie right now. There's no reason not to. They're not very
Yeah.
crowded.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation, right? This idea of like, oh my, I'm not stepping foot in a movie theater. I'm not doing
Yeah,
that. That's too dangerous. But then going to the grocery store is any safer?
yeah. I mean, everybody I've talked to, like, oh my gosh, you went and saw a movie? It's like, yeah, they're not very crowded right now, actually. Definitely less crowded than your neighborhood restaurant. So,
Yeah, that's the thing. It'd be one thing if every seat in that IMAX theater had been taken and we were just packed in there. That maybe be one thing, but there's no movie theaters like that right now. I mean, there's not. I mean, until they get like a really big, maybe must-see movie like a James Bond or Black Widow or something, maybe those will be crowded, but it's fine.
yeah, yeah. It's a holiday weekend too, so go figure.
Yeah, kind of a holiday. Yeah, I guess. I mean, you don't typically a big, Chris Nolan blockbuster movie wouldn't be opening on Labor Day weekend. Like Labor Day weekend is usually pretty quiet, right? Like late August to mid-September is like the dead zone.
I know. Well, do you remember? You're really good with dates. When
Yeah.
did we saw Memento in theaters?
Yeah.
When did that come out, and what was it up against?
I don't know what it was up against. So Memento came out in the spring of 2001. So we were sophomores in high school. And it was one of those movies that kind of slowly rolled out throughout the country for a couple of months. Like it started in LA, New York, and then slowly made its way to Reno at some point. I want to say it was like March, like spring break-ish, something around there. And I have no recollection of how I heard about the movie or like, how did I know I have to see this? Because it's a small film. It's not like it wasn't like a major studio release movie. I think we saw that together. I saw it in theaters twice, if I remember correctly. So one of those times was with you.
Yeah, I definitely saw it once, like opening weekend. I remember that. And
Yeah,
it must have had buzz. It must have done a film like circuit, or maybe it went to a competition somewhere. Maybe it was Sundance. Was it a Sundance
well,
film?
so it premiered. It was either Venice or Telluride or Toronto, one of those three big film festivals. It premiered in the fall of 2000. So there were months and months of buildup to when it actually was released the following spring. So I think in those few months, like word got out because it's such a strong film. Like I'm sure word got out. I'm sure I saw it in like Entertainment Weekly or saw it online, like this weird twisty thriller coming. And I was, by 2001, I think you were the same way. Like we were interested in, alternative films and indie films. I mean, I'm sure we saw 20 movies back in high school that if you were to bring up the title, I'd be like, what like what was that about? Like we saw everything. Like if it had anything, I mean, we saw Wing Commander.
What happened to that film? Still available anywhere?
I'm sure, if you go on like Amazon Prime has almost everything. Like the most obscure movie you could ever imagine, $2.99 you can watch it. Like they have it. Like almost everything you can find. And if you can't find it, that makes it more interesting to me. Like how do I find this movie? All right, so let me before we get to Memento specifically, I just have a few notes about Chris Nolan, and then you can chime in with any comments you might have about him. So he was born on July 30th, 1970. This was actually surprising to me. I don't know why. He's been around a while. I thought he was older than 50. Like he's so like accomplished in his career. Like I thought he was like maybe late 50s or something like that. I was like, he's only 50? I mean, think of all the films he's made.
Well, that means how old was he when he did Memento?
So yeah, Memento was screened in the fall of 2000. So he was probably 28, 29.
That's it. That's
Like
incredible.
he was not yet 30 when he made Memento. That's crazy, yeah. So he was influenced early on by the work of Ridley Scott and the science fiction films 2001: A Space Odyssey and Star Wars. Those were kind of his two movies growing up that he was into and wanted to kind of emulate in his work. So he began making films at age 7, borrowing his father's Super 8 camera. We were a little bit too young for the Super 8 camera. We had the digital back in the 90s, but it was probably easier for us, right? To actually like do the Super 8 thing. I never had to do it in film school or anything. I'm kind of sad about that.
I did 16 millimeter once,
Yeah.
and that was enough. That was enough.
Yeah, my thesis film was shot on Super 16 or 16 millimeter, and it was a great experience, but it's tough. Like every take costs money. You know, like it's like,
Yeah, it was super expensive. And even when I did it in 2004, you couldn't process the film locally. You had to ship your film to LA and wait weeks to get it back just to see if you had anything.
Yeah, like we
finding a projector.
It was so weird to film for 3 days, and then it was like at least 2 weeks, maybe longer, before I like was able to like sit in the screening room and see the footage. So you have no idea. Like, does any of this work? Does it look good? I don't know. And we even caught some shots that you know, the cinematographer sitting with me, he's like, "Oh, I did that wrong," and I'm like, "Well, it's too late now. You know, we can't go back." So
yeah, I still have my film somewhere. I keep it in a refrigerator. They told me to keep it cold somewhere. I have no way to watch it though.
I still have my raw film. It's in the closet. I'm sure it's probably ruined after 13 years, but it's still there. So he studied English literature at University College London. And after graduation in 1993, he worked as a script reader and a camera operator. His first film was a short called Larceny, and he made a bunch of shorts after that throughout the mid 90s. He attempted a feature film around 95, 96 called Larry Mahoney, but it never came to be. And then this amazing book I just finished reading. Have you heard of this? You might not have heard of it. It's called Biggest Movie Year Ever by Brian Rafferty. And it's all about the year of 1999 and remember that year, all the amazing films that came out that year? That was the year of like Election and Fight Club and Magnolia. I still remember you laughing hysterically during the frog sequence in Magnolia.
I know. Well, now when stuff like that happens, that's the funniest stuff now, when it's just like out of nowhere comedy where it like isn't even with it's just they do whatever tone, whatever pacing, they just throw stuff in. It's like the best.
After 3 hours, and oh my God, Philip Seymour Hoffman, oh my God, frogs are falling. And I just remember you were just losing it. You were like crying laughing. But anyway, that book's about the year 99. And so his first semi-feature film called Following, it premiered not at Sundance, but at Slamdance, January 1999. So Christopher Nolan's first feature film was rejected by Sundance, if you can believe it. They rejected it. And, I've looked at, I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched some of Following. It's on the Criterion channel. It's like 70 minutes long. It's got some cool stuff in it, but it feels very much like a commercial film to get another project going. Like, hey, look at what I can do. Give me a real movie, give me funding. So had you heard of Following or know anything about his first film that came out it never actually got released.
Yeah.
In theaters, it just played festivals in 99.
Yeah, no, I'm Memento and everything. I've seen everything Memento and on in theaters. I did not go back to his short. He has a couple shorts.
Yeah.
I didn't do any of those.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, if you're like a Nolan completist, you kind of have to take a look at it. Like if you've seen all of his films and you're interested in his work, but it's a kind of like a minor effort. It's kind of one of those things where it's like how we think of David Fincher. His first movie was technically Alien 3, but most of us think of his first film as 7, because that's like the first like real Fincher film, like about like dark themes and kind of like fits really well into his career. James Cameron's first film was Piranha 2: The Spawning, but most of us think of his first film as The Terminator, because that's like his first like real movie where he had like a stamp on it. So yeah, so for me, and I think for you too, his first real feature film is Memento, which came out in the spring of 2001, at least in theaters. So what are your memories of Memento? I have not seen it in a long time.
I remember I've seen it several times. I've not seen it in a while. But the thing with Memento that always stuck with me is every time I watched it, I forgot what I forgot everything from the time I watched it before. I remember always liking it, and then I rewatched it, like, oh yeah, that's what happened. And then by the end of it, the full reveal is always like a re-surprise for me. And I think Memento, because of that, has really good rewatch value. It's one of those first movies I can remember watching where you can't miss even a few seconds of
Yeah.
it, or you've missed a big chunk of the movie. And like, I like that that's a Christopher Nolan kind of trait where if you have to take a restroom break mid scene,
You have
you're
to
like,
pause it.
you come back and like it's been 2 minutes and you are so lost. So lost. And I remember Memento was like kind of started off there. Like he doesn't dumb anything down for the audience. It's just here you go.
He doesn't want you to take bathroom breaks. Like I think he designs his films in a way where he's like, okay, if you want to leave the room for 4 or 5 minutes, you're screwed.
Yeah. And I wish had no idea how long Tenet was till yesterday, obviously, when we saw that. That
Yeah,
was a,
I had
surprise.
to I had to use the restroom. I was like I was gonna make it to the end, and then I looked at my phone and I saw the movie still had 45 minutes, and I was like, okay, no, this is gonna be bad. So I had to leave for a few minutes. But like Tenet, we'll get to Tenet, but that movie was so confusing that I'm sure like if I had stayed for those 4 or 5 minutes, it wouldn't make any more sense than
No.
leaving the
And the
room.
thing that's funny
But
is you missed like 3 scenes, but it's
oh,
not
I
going to
missed 3. Oh, okay. So apparently, all my listeners, when I have to have a bathroom break, I miss 3 scenes because
explain
that's how long I'm gone.
everything. Everything was
Yeah.
explained in that
Did,
short
did, did
3
I miss
minutes.
the one scene where Michael Caine just looks at the camera and says, "Okay, so this is what's been happening"?
Yeah, he came back one more time and he just said hello, and then he left.
That was almost like his Michael Caine's one scene in that movie. It's like, okay, we get it. He has to be in every movie. Was he in Dunkirk? I don't think he was in Dunkirk, his last one.
No
I don't
way,
think so.
no.
Yeah. Okay.
Unless he was like hidden in a background somewhere and we didn't see him.
Yeah. So Memento was a pretty big hit. It was a very low budget movie. Just a couple million, I think. Did I write down how much it cost? I mean, it was just a few million, very 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 small budget, and it made over 40 million. So it was kind of a good one to get him on the map. And then, do you remember what his second film was after, or his next film was?
Insomnia.
Insomnia. That's the one I know. Like I enjoyed it. I've seen it the one time. I've not revisited that film. I don't ever really think about that one. And then I'm like, oh right. Between Memento and Batman Begins, he made Insomnia.
I remember it was a great movie. Wasn't Robin Williams the villain?
Robin Williams is the villain. That crazy year where he played 3 bad guys. Death to Smoochie, 1 Hour Photo, and Insomnia.
Yeah, and I want to say, I think I like Death to Smoochie the most. If we're going to rate those 3,
I love Death to Smoochie. 1 Hour Photo, I think, is the strongest of the 3.
I don't know. It's hard to say. I remember Insomnia was definitely interesting. I don't remember much other than they were up north, and
it was like Always Light Out, right? Or was it the other way around?
Yeah, it was always light out.
Always Light Out.
That was the thing.
And it was Al Pacino and Hilary Swank and Robin Williams, and it was great cast. And he made that. That came out in summer of 2002, right? So he must have gone right into Insomnia pretty soon after Memento. I saw online, it said director Steven Soderbergh was impressed by Memento, and he recruited Nolan to direct the remake of the 1997 Norwegian film Insomnia. Okay. So Nolan's version, that was a remake of a foreign film.
It's funny. I feel like you can tell when it's a Nolan idea versus he was hired to do something. Because to me, that doesn't come off as like his. I'm sure it was directed in his style. I'd have to revisit it, but it's not his story. There was no sci-fi twist in it. There was no magic or anything like that. He always seems to have something. It seems, and it's always two layered as well. Always the characters have a layer, and then the audience gets a second layer, like from him and his writing and his style. I just feel like The Prestige, which we'll get to, that one definitely had some interesting concepts going on. Interstellar, all these ones.
Yeah, I think he's like super heavily involved with the screenplay stage, even if he doesn't directly write it. But like Tenet, it said written and directed by Christopher Nolan. Like he is powerful enough. He could just hire someone to write the screenplay, right? He could, be like if Alfred Hitchcock was sitting down every year and writing a new script for his like Hitchcock hired people to write the script and then he made it. Like you think it always surprised me that Nolan takes that time to develop these projects and work on the screenplay for many months or years. And some of these projects that he later made, like Inception, like he was developing for like a decade. These were not things that he just like, started working on and then a year later they were shooting. Like some of these were like long, like, gestating and, taking many years.
Yeah.
But yeah, that takes us to Batman. So I was kind of interested, like between Insomnia and Batman Begins, he was developing some projects. He was going to make a Howard Hughes biopic starring Jim Carrey. Had you ever heard of that? That never passed. I never saw that like online or anything. I was like, what? A Chris Nolan, Jim Carrey movie? Like, okay. But then Martin Scorsese made The Aviator. So then he ended up abandoning that.
That's a good call.
So then in 2003, Nolan approached Warner Brothers with the idea of making Batman. He wanted to make the film more grounded and relatable. And it's kind of crazy to think that he was hired just off of Memento and Insomnia, two smaller films like that. They gave him the keys to Batman, but I think it was a pretty good choice on their part when you say.
That's interesting. I didn't realize Nolan, it was his idea to want to do a Batman.
Yeah, they didn't approach him. He wanted to do it. Yeah, I don't know if he wanted to do 3 of them.
Yeah,
like from the research, I don't think he really wanted to do the 3rd one. It was just kind of like that. Well, I guess we have to finish the story. Kind of like, and you can feel it too in Dark Knight Rises that he's not quite as passionate about the storytelling as he is in the first 2. But what are your memories of Batman Begins, which came out in June of 2005? Did you like it at the time?
I remember having zero expectations for it. That take on the character, I remember in previews, like, it's not going to work. Why are we doing Batman again? Like, that last one just was not good.
Okay.
And then you watch Batman Begins, and it worked, but it wasn't necessarily like it had to be Batman in it, which I think was what made it kind of interesting. He could have come up with a similar character of his own creation, thrown it into a very similar story and had a good film. It was the first movie where like you were as entertained with Bruce Wayne's character as you were when he was the Batman. And I think that was a big thing, that as well as the tone and his cinematography, like basically set up a generation of 1,000 reboots to come.
Yeah, and now it's like every 3 years we have a new reboot of like the Joker or Batman. It's like it's almost like it's hard to keep up with it all.
Yeah, I think it even branches out past superheroes. I mean, anything that's been rebooted. Look, Star Trek, I mean, it has its own take. Like, you know what? I bet we can make it a little grittier and it'll be more modern. And like, I think Batman Begins was the start of like
it was, yeah,
the new gritty remake. So
but I thought enough time had passed between Batman and Robin, and Batman Begins was about 8 years, and Batman and Robin especially is like the tonally so much different that it was kind of like a breath of fresh air to see see that material taken more seriously. But now you have like, I mean, I think Spider-Man has really ruined this for everybody, because Spider-Man has shown the world that, we can reboot this like 3 times and people will keep coming. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, oh, those 2 movies with Andrew Garfield, just forget those. It's like, what? Okay. I invested my time in those 2 movies and then they just like switch over to something else that has been even more popular. So,
Oh yeah, that's mainstream now. I mean, even DC, they have I guess technically the TV shows also count now, right? They're all in the same universe, and everything.
Oh yeah,
everything technically exists because of the multiverse aspect, which is probably
where there's like 100 worlds and like there's different versions of every character. It's like how do you come to care about anything if there's just like 100 versions of every story? It's like, okay,
exactly.
But
why retcon it where you can just actually make it count? You don't have to rewrite it.
And then the new Halloween showed us that you can just do away with every sequel and just pretend like they don't exist. And oh nope, the new one, she didn't die in Resurrection. She's alive. It's a sequel to the first one. And you're like, and I'm like, great, because I love that character. But it is kind of strange to think, oh, you can do that. Okay, you can just pretend like those sequels don't exist. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I don't think Christopher Nolan meant to start this, but he started.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I liked Batman Begins. For me, it's like I feel like Batman Begins there's so much like introductory elements to it that it's kind of a hard movie to rewatch more than a couple. Like it's so much of that movie feels like it's setting up the second film. You know, like the villains aren't as strong. Katie Holmes is kind of weak in the female role. It's like I have some issues with it. But I mean, before it came out, I knew it was going to be, you know, at least good, if not great, because of that cast. I mean, the cast in that movie is amazing, and then it got even better with Dark Knight. So you could like feel at the end of Batman Begins, like, okay, I think the next one's going to be something really cool. Like you could really feel it. But yeah, I wasn't like, some critics were like the greatest superhero movie ever, and I wasn't quite on board with the first of his Batman film.
Yeah, it's not the greatest ever told, but it was definitely a fresh take on that character. And I think that was important in showing what you can do with the creative. And like, you don't have to be locked into, you know, just because the way it used to be done, that's not how you always have to do it. And I think that was an interesting idea. I like watching that movie too, because it's not overly CGI. And I think that was nice. And I still think that any movie that relies on practical effects today, it's noticeable and it pays off in the long run. And you don't see a ton of that in that first film, which is great.
Yeah, I think in 2005 we were kind of sick of CG, right? Like if you look at like the CG from the early 2000s, a lot of it looks really terrible. And I think we were kind of like we wanted something that where we could see action scenes that were actually done like in camera, and that's been Christopher Nolan's big thing from the beginning, right? I mean, sometimes like in Inception he has to use effects, but for the most part, he tries to get everything in camera, which is like always exciting, all the way up to Tenet, right? So, yeah.
No, and that's the big part. And whoever he uses for his cinematography, I mean, that's one of his greatest aspects as well. Is just the way his films look. Seeing them Tenet even on the IMAX, that was a good choice. I didn't even think about, you know, when considering to go see it.
Yeah, I don't really care about IMAX unless a big chunk of the movie was filmed with IMAX cameras, then it's worth it. But if they just like blow it up to the bigger screen, it's not that big of a deal. Like it doesn't change much. But like you notice, like in Tenet, like the scenes that were shot not on IMAX, it's, you know, it's like the screen is a little bit smaller, and then when it cuts to an action sequence, and then it's just like ceiling to the ground, and you know, like, okay, this is like, there's no other way to see a scene like this than in IMAX. It's the best way to watch it. So yeah. All right, and so because he didn't want to, I guess, didn't want to go right into Dark Knight, he made The Prestige, which is probably the most forgettable of his films. Like I saw it once and I have no recollection of it. It's Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale, right?
Yeah. Two Christian Bales.
And it's like magician. It's like it was there was another magician movie that year called The Illusionist with Edward Norton. I remember that one more. That one sticks out in my mind more. Was Scarlett Johansson in The Prestige? Isn't she in it? I think she's like the female like lead character in that movie. Maybe.
I think so. Gosh, I can't even remember that one either. I mean, I remember The Prestige. I've seen it twice, I want to say. I remember I really enjoyed it, but the twist of that one annoyed me a little.
Okay.
Because any film can apparently do what he just did. Because remember, it gets all the way to the end and you think it's all magic, and then it turns out he really has a teleportation device, and you're like, well, why can't every movie just introduce a teleportation device at the end? And
there wasn't a lot of like foreshadowing to that. Like it was one of those endings that just kind of comes out of nowhere, and you're like, oh, okay.
The twist that Christian Bale was secretly a twin, and that was the key to his magic, was great. Mm-hmm. The other guy actually invented a teleportation device, like, was ridiculous.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't have a lot to say about that one. It seemed to be a project that he probably had been developing for a few years and probably put it aside to do Batman, and then he probably saw a window where he was like, okay, if I don't make The Prestige in the next 6 months, I'll probably have to do the next Batman, and I won't get a chance to do it. So it's probably one of those kind of projects for him. And then 2008 we get The Dark Knight, which is my favorite Nolan movie. I've probably watched it 10 times, and I can't get enough of it. It's like, for me, it's like, the Goodfellas of the 2000s. It's just like this epic, like, it has everything you want in a movie. It's long, but not so long that you really start losing interest. I feel like it's as long as it should be. And Heath Ledger's performance, it was so mind-blowing that opening night. I saw it back in 2008. I still think about that. That was probably one of the 10 best movie-going experiences. We saw it in IMAX, opening night, every seat taken. I had seen just a little bit from the movie. I didn't really know what to expect, and it was like, I remember we got home at like 1:30 in the morning, and we couldn't go to bed, right? We had to talk about the movie till like 3. We had to like decompress, and we had to like talk about what we had just seen, because every time I see it on TV, I'll watch it for half an hour. Like, it's just one of those movies that I just think everything gels in The Dark Knight.
Yeah, I would agree. It's like end to end, every scene is just so well constructed. Every character is so like just fleshed out. You get to know they did a really good job even recasting Katie Holmes.
Yeah. Not awkward, right? Like Maggie Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, she was great in that role. And it just, the villain, I mean, how many Oscars did that one win? I know at least
Heath Ledger won. Well, there was a big controversy that year because it's such an outstanding film that everyone expected it to be one of the 5 Best Picture nominees, and it didn't get Picture or Director, and everyone was shocked by that. And then the next year, that's when they went to 10 nominees because there was such an outcry. Like, how could you nominate The Reader for Best Picture over The Dark Knight? It was just kind of like, what? Like, that's when they said, oh, okay, I guess we got to do 10 nominations.
Yeah,
because people were so upset. But I think Christopher Nolan deserved a director nomination for that. That's kind of crazy to think he didn't get, if not Best Picture, like, you think he would have gotten a nomination for directing. I mean, it's so well directed all the way through.
Oh yeah, everything in The Dark Knight, the action scenes, just the character development, the way that they pulled from, again, like you said, for the last one, they pull it through, and the second movie is such the payoff.
Yeah. Everything that's kind of set up in the first one, it pays off. You don't need all that intro stuff in the second movie. It's just now we're on to a new story, and we can just get going right from the start. And I think Christopher Nolan's been trying to replicate the success of that opening sequence of Dark Knight ever since. Like even the beginning of Tenet, it kind of was like, okay, he's kind of doing the opening of Dark Knight and that scene in The Dark Knight Rises when they're on the football field, and the opening 10 minutes of The Dark Knight, at the bank is so visceral, so well done. Like it just like draws you into the film just right from the first shot. It's so good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. The Dark Knight was it's one of those films I want my kids to get into Batman so I can show them this one in
a few years, right?
Yeah, no, they're not even close. I can't get them to sit down for even the bigger Marvel movies yet.
Yeah.
Let alone The Dark Knight. But
yeah. And one other thing, I always think about The Dark Knight and Heath Ledger in that film. And I mean, what a haunting quality his death kind of brought to that movie. He died in January of 2008, and then the film didn't come out till July. So it was like a long kind of stretch before the film actually came out. But just how he's not, it's not like the Jack Nicholson Batman, where it's almost like Jack Nicholson is the star of that movie and Michael Keaton's like number 2 on the call sheet, And I just always think about how in The Dark Knight that Heath Ledger, he's in the movie, only in parts, right? Like he could have taken over that whole movie. He could have been half of the narrative, but he's like, he'll be gone for 30-40 minutes, right? And it's almost like his absence actually like adds tension to the movie, and you're waiting for him to come back. And when he does come back, it's always great. And it's like, but then you have these quieter moments, and you're not quite sure what he's doing behind the scenes. And I love it.
Yeah, the mystery of what the Joker is up to is what makes the movie so great. Yeah. His insanity isn't over the top. Like, Jared Leto's Joker is like ridiculously over the top. The fact that you don't know what's going on in Heath Ledger's Joker's mind, and then he says something, and it's like haunting. He keeps changing his story.
The story about how he got
his scars that's brilliant. That is brilliant writing, and it shows truly how crazy this character is.
And I also love that he lived just long enough to give us Brokeback Mountain and The Dark Knight, two completely different performances, one that's extremely reserved and then one that's showier. And that in Brokeback Mountain, he acts alongside Jake Gyllenhaal. And in The Dark Knight, he acts alongside Maggie Gyllenhaal. I just it was like it was kind of like the perfect combination there. I still think about him a lot. I'm really sad to think of how many great films and performances he would have done in the last 13 years and more. Philip Seymour Hoffman too. Some of these actors who died too soon. Chadwick Boseman, who we just lost. The idea that 20 to 30 or more years of film, it's not the same without these people in it. So
yeah,
I miss them. All right, so after The Dark Knight, we get Inception. So yeah, Christopher Nolan decided to go smaller, right? Make a smaller film after The Dark Knight. Well, so The Dark Knight made over $1 billion, right? So by then, like, Chris Nolan could make anything he wanted. And I think if he could secure Leonardo DiCaprio, he can make anything. It doesn't have to be based on a comic book or anything. Like, he could do something original. What do we think of Inception as follow-up to The Dark Knight? Did we like Inception?
Oh yeah, Inception was fantastic. That's one of the ones I've watched multiple times also, and every time I watch it, I kind of forget a little bit about it just because the way the pacing goes, where it's just like the scene's just kind of, it's like a scene goes, and then it's like you're just in the next scene. There's not really a beginning, middle, and end of each scene. You're just kind of jump cutting almost every single time. And so I remember Inception was just fantastic, and I think to me Inception is the superior Tenet, because the structure of the film was better balanced. Like when they actually go into the final mission on Inception, it's the right proportion of the movie. Tenet, the final mission, is too late in the film.
Yeah.
And that's, I'm jumping ahead to today and comparing it, but they're the most similar films in the ones he's made. And I think the Inception, the final act, is the payoff of everything that's led up to it.
Yeah, Inception, like, it keeps building and building, and you are right there with everything that's happening at the end. Whereas Tenet, I felt like the best part of Tenet, which we'll talk about, was the middle hour. Like, for me, it was the middle hour of Tenet that worked really well, and then the beginning 45 minutes and the last 45 minutes I had some issues with. But yeah, Inception, amazing, great. I loved every minute of that movie. Another great cast with Ellen Page and Marion Cotillard and Michael Caine, right? Michael Caine's in everything.
Oh yeah, of course.
Michael Caine is on call, right? Michael Caine dies, we will get his ghost in the next movie. Just you wait. I actually forgot that Inception was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. I forgot that it got the Best Picture nomination. I'm sure they were making up for Dark Knight. They were like, okay, we'll give you, but he still didn't get director. He would not get director until later on, until he made like a realistic war film. And they're okay, we'll give you a director this time. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt too is great in Inception. I really like that one. And then Nolan was like, okay, well, I guess I have to do one more Batman, since the story didn't really end at the end of Dark Knight. You kind of needed one more, right, to kind of wrap up the story. And The Dark Knight made over $1 billion, so I think they were like, and it's probably one of those things where he was like, well, maybe I could produce it and hire someone else to direct the third one. But it's probably one of those moments where he's like, I should probably do it, like, just to keep the continuity. So The Dark Knight Rises. You I think you said you weren't a big fan of this one. So now we're entering territory that films that you're not as happy with.
This is the dark years of Nolan, and this is my least favorite of his films. And I think, honestly, anytime you're adapting a comic book movie, my idea of a comic book is that it never ends because it's a comic book and it just keeps going and going and going. I would rather The Dark Knight had been the end.
Open-ended
ending. Any comic should end that way. There should never be a definitive ending. There should always be a teaser of, on the next issue. Yeah. That is important. And I feel like this one, again, I don't know if Nolan wanted to do this movie or if he just wanted money. Or
no, I think it was something. It was probably in between, right? It was probably more than I need a paycheck. It was probably more than that. But I would guess that there was probably some pressure on him to do it, and he probably was kind of like, I don't know.
The problem is there are old Bruce Wayne stories that exist out there that have been that would have made a better story. And it's almost like he wanted to do that because so much time passed in the Batman universe for this. I think it was like 8 years between the two films. And it's kind of hard, again, in the comic book ideas. It's like, no, I have to imagine that after the last Batman movie, Batman went on a bunch more missions and had a bunch more villains pop up. And the idea that he's been dormant for 8 years and is
Yeah.
now basically crippled from his short time as Batman, because the first two films actually take place pretty close together, right?
Mhm.
If you like watch them, like that bugged me right out of the gate.
The way it starts, and yeah, it's just like, really, that's what he's been doing.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't like the idea that they tried to up the stakes in the third one, where it's like, oh, now it's just a nuclear bomb in the city, and like I didn't like that it was all of a sudden just it wasn't as smart of a villainous plot. And also, again, it's like they wanted to not have him in mask for a certain percentage of the film, and I just thought the chunk where they just injure him and throw him in a prison mid-film before it even gotten any good Batman scenes, the movie's like rebuilding up again. Yeah. And like we've already seen him as cool Batman. Let's get some more of that cool Batman. And it's just a long film.
And it's long, isn't it? Like almost 3 hours. Like I want to say Dark Knight is 2.5 hours, and isn't Rises like 2 hours and 50? It's like really long. Yeah. And it feels long.
Oh, it feels long.
Like it's a lot of stretches of scenes where you're like, all right, let's get to the next action scene or something here. Not a whole lot's going on.
Yeah, it just has silly continuity stuff where it's like, oh, he has a jet now. Why didn't he use the jet last time?
Yeah. That was the big teaser, like at the end of the trailer, right? It was like the jet and like the new gadgets he's got, and it's like, oh wow, cool. And it's like, but that's like at the very end. Like you have to wait a long time to get to that.
Yeah, exactly. I just the whole idea of that one, it just, when you watch it and like, oh, he took the time in this one to go paint a flaming bat on the bridge before like re-entering the city, stuff like that was just kind of like, oh, now we're back into the Batman and Robin territory of just being cheesy.
Well, it's not quite Batman and Robin territory, which is one of the first movies I remember seeing when I was like 12, 13. I liked everything. Like there was an image on the screen. I was like, this is great. And Batman and Robin was like one of the first big movies I remember at what was I, 12 when that came? I think 12, 97, where I was like, this is bad. This is not good. Like I could like feel it watching it at that young age, and I didn't feel that very much. So I was like happy when they finally rebooted Batman, gave us something better. But so yeah, if I had to choose, I'd probably rewatch Dark Knight Rises if I had the choice between that and Batman and Robin. But my thing is like there was nowhere to go but down. Like there was no, like, villain wise, story wise, like there was no way it was going to be a better film than The Dark Knight. So it was like, okay, well, will it be kind of close to as good? And like if The Dark Knight is a 10, I found The Dark Knight Rises like a 6.5. It's like not bad. There are some sequences in it that I like, and I think Anne Hathaway is pretty good in it. Like Bane just never came to life for me in that movie. Like Tom Hardy gave it his best shot, and that opening sequence is kind of creepy a little bit, like when we first get his reveal. But like that character never really came to life for me, and I thought more could have been done with Catwoman. Like she does what she can, Anne Hathaway, in that movie, but.
Yeah.
Then the reveal of Robin at the end was kind of an eye roll.
Oh, that was pointless.
Like, oh, his name's Robin.
What a useless tag.
Yeah. I think my favorite moment in that whole movie is Michael Caine sobbing at the funeral or at the cemetery. That's probably like my favorite moment. But then it's kind of like brushed aside when he actually sees Bruce Wayne at that like restaurant or whatever, and he like does like the he's like, hey, and then okay, well,
okay.
that moment of him crying.
Yeah, didn't he fake his death once before in the first one? Oh, he's gonna be back. I get it.
Yeah, but it's probably a good thing they stopped it there, because I'm sure like if Nolan had wanted to do parts 4 and 5 back to back, they would have said go do it. And it would have been interesting to have seen like what would he have done with the Penguin or the Riddler, some of the other big villain characters at the Rogues Gallery. I remember at the time I was like, Bane, Bane's the bad guy. Like Chris Nolan, come on, you just did the Joker. You got to go bigger, right? You got to do something like really wild. But I remember that at the time there was rumor that it was going to be the Penguin and the Riddler. Penguin was going to be Philip Seymour Hoffman, and Riddler was going to be Johnny Depp. That would have been that would have been interesting.
That would have been great.
but never came to me.
I always wonder if the third movie was kind of thrown off course, because was the Joker originally supposed to be in it?
And I heard he was. I heard like the long. I mean, I don't know 100%, but I think the Joker character was supposed to be in a part of the third movie, and then that obviously he wasn't going to recast it, so they just put that aside. But we'll never know. Like what, like if the Joker had been in, even a quarter of the third film, what that would have been. I don't know.
Yeah,
interesting. All right, so after Dark Knight Rises, also made $1 billion, which surprised me. I mean, I guess people just saw it anyway, right? It was one of those that you had to go see. And then he did Interstellar after that, came out 2.5 years later. So up until like Dark Knight Rises, it's like every 2 years he makes a movie or less. And then in the last decade or the last 8 years, it's starting to get a little bit longer, right, between movies. I wonder if his next film will be 2023. I almost think it might be 2024. Like it might start to get longer,
Well, it's funny because on like IMDb doesn't have anything listed for the next film, and a lot of times you see in production or something like.
Oh, nobody knows. I don't think he ever announces his next film like the year the new one comes out. Right? Like, I don't think we'll hear anything until summer 2021. That's probably why he pushed to get Tenet out now, because he probably has another project he wants to do, and he wanted to like, let's get this one behind me so I can now focus on the next one and not be like, okay, another year until Tenet comes out. I mean, I could kind of understand that a little bit, but so Interstellar has people who love it, and I've watched it twice. I saw it a second time about a year later. I was like, okay, I'm going to give this another shot. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the casting of Matthew McConaughey or like, I find a lot of that film deadly dull, and it never worked for me. And then it goes into all, kind of Inception area at the end where he's like flying around in the library and like it's one of those movies, and Tenet was also kind of like this too, where I feel very stupid as I watch it, and I don't like that feeling.
I remember watching Interstellar, and again, I've only seen it once in 2014.
You only saw the once
out of it, and going to like a restaurant afterwards, and it was like I just sat there and I had like, because I'm kind of a sciencey nerd, and I'm like, okay, I've got 50 well, why did that happen questions, and it was like every scene. Every scene is like, well, why would the drone have flown that way when it was going that way? Like nothing in that movie made sense, and it wasn't good science. And like he was trying to be clever with some like ideas about physics, right? Like that was the whole point of that movie. Like trying to help people understand the concept of space, time, and gravity, and what interstellar travel could look like if we're able to use a wormhole to go through, right? And that's what he was playing with. Was the idea of the way light and sound pass through a wormhole in space. And it was just not done well. It was
it's playing with some interesting ideas, and I give him, appreciation for that. But the two things I loved about it were the look of the film was great, and I loved the score.
It looked great.
I have the score. Like I listen to the score sometimes when I'm writing fiction and stuff. The score is amazing. Most of Christopher Nolan's movies has a great score. I think almost all of them by Hans Zimmer, right? Doesn't he do most of them?
Yeah, I think so.
Who did The Dark Knight? I'm pretty sure it's Hans Zimmer, right? I'm gonna feel stupid if it's someone else. I think it's him. But yeah, I think his maybe Dark Knight's probably my number one favorite Nolan score, but Interstellar is probably number two. Even though the film itself, it's not something I necessarily want to revisit again. I tried it a second time about a year later, and the thing with Christopher Nolan movies is that it's never going to be better than when you see it in IMAX, right? Like if you put on Interstellar a year later at home, it's not going to be better than when you saw it in IMAX. So it's like I was an hour in on the second viewing, and I was like, why? Like this is not going well. And the cast is fine. McConaughey, it was kind of like the McConaissance era where he was in like 17 movies and winning an Oscar, and that was kind of Interstellar was kind of like his big, blockbuster, return to big movie making.
Yeah.
And Anne Hathaway back from Dark Knight Rises, and Michael Caine again, right? He was in that one.
Oh, yeah. Of course. He was the dad, right?
And then Jessica Chastain was like the older, like the daughter, but older when she's an adult,
Right.
and he's still the same age. And then I still remember how much the appearance of Matt Damon took me out of the movie. I was like, what? Like, you don't see that too often where like a major star just shows up in like a kind of a cameo role halfway through a dramatic film. Like I was like, what? Right before he did The Martian, which was, it was also this, you know, it was like wasn't it like every year for 5 years we got like a space movie? It started with Gravity.
Yep.
And then Interstellar and The Martian and Life, which I really liked, and then First Man. So there's been like one every year.
I'm gonna count Ad Astra on here.
Ad
too,
Astra.
that was like the same idea again.
Yeah, it had kind of some tonal, you know, similarities to Interstellar.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought that was a pretty strong film. Brad Pitt had a good 2019. He had 2 good films.
I liked Ad Astra was like if Gravity and Interstellar had a baby.
Yeah. Well, you know where you know which one I prefer. You know, lifelong Sandra Bullock fan, to see her finally do a really great film in Gravity. But I'm kind of glad Gravity came out in 2013. It wasn't, you know, later in the decade, because after Gravity, all of a sudden you saw all these space movies, and I'm like, well, Gravity got there first in a way. You know? So, but yeah, Interstellar, you know, not one of my favorites. I know it has its fans. I know people who think it's like his best film, and like people who just absolutely love it, but I'm not in that camp. All right, so did you see Dunkirk, his 2017 war film?
I did, but I saw it really late. Like I saw it after it had already been nominated for everything.
Oh, okay. So you didn't see it. Okay.
I did not understand. I don't know the previews for that one. Do you remember the preview? How slow the preview was? It was like the guys on the dock turning their heads. Dunkirk. And I was like, nope.
Well, by Dunkirk, even though I didn't love, you know, Interstellar or Dark Knight Rises, you know, by 2017, it's like if Christopher Nolan wrote and directed a film, I'm gonna go opening weekend. Like, unless I'm out of town. Like, I don't have to, like, Tenet, I didn't know what it was about, really. I'd seen the trailer, but I still don't really know what it's about after I've seen it. But Dunkirk, what I appreciate about Dunkirk is that it's much easier to follow than some of his other films, even though you follow like 3 or 4 different stories, right? It kind of hops around to different characters and stuff. I found it a little bit easier to follow than some of his other work of the last, 10 years. And I love the look of that film. It's so like stark, and like some moments are, terrifying with some of the like aerial footage, and then other moments, like the quieter moments with some of the younger actors in the film. Like we've been getting some really solid war films recently. I loved 1917. Did you see that one that came out that came out earlier this year? 1917.
I have not seen that one.
It's 2-hour movie in one shot, kind of one shot. It's obviously more than one shot, but they make it look like
the camera. What?
Yeah, minute, hour and 48. No, we have an extra walking by the camera. But yeah, I mean, Dunkirk doesn't really feel like anything else Nolan has made. It's kind of like this other thing. You can kind of like compare Tenet with, what was the one you compared Tenet with? Inception. Like there's like, and then you have the Batman films, and Dunkirk is kind of its own thing. He hasn't really done a historical film based on like real events before, right? Isn't that kind of his only one?
There's no twist ending. There's no magic or science fiction. It's just war story.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I wouldn't put it as like his best film or anything, and it's not one I've revisited since. I only saw it opening weekend. I have not watched it a second time, so that I think that tells you I didn't maybe love it, but that viewing in IMAX opening weekend, I was pretty blown away by it, and so maybe one of these years I'll check it out again on my home screen. Not quite the same. But so you saw it like before the Oscars and everything. Like, what did you think of Dunkirk?
I remember seeing it around then. I don't think it was to me in my mind. I wasn't like, oh, this is gonna sweep. Like it didn't.
Yeah, there was talk of it sweeping early.
There's something about it that it wasn't like. I don't think this is gonna take a lot of Oscars. But isn't this where he won?
He did. So he finally got a Best Director nomination for Dunkirk. Okay. He had been nominated before for producing Inception, for writing Memento. He got a screenplay nomination for Memento, but his first director nomination was for Dunkirk.
God,
So,
yeah, I'm
yeah,
sure he was
because he made an historical film about war. So that's how you do it, man. If you want the director nom, make a war film.
Yeah.
And then so that came out in the summer of and I actually had to look. I was like curious how much money his last couple films have made. So Interstellar made 700 million worldwide, which I was surprising to me. I didn't know it made that much. And Dunkirk made more than 500 million worldwide.
Wow.
That's crazy to me. I thought Dunkirk was like maybe 250.
Yeah.
Like 500 million that movie made. Okay. So he's had a run, right? I think The Prestige didn't do great, but pretty much everything, and Insomnia, I think maybe, but like starting with Dark Knight to Dunkirk, right? Every movie has been a huge success. And then, so I'll be curious to see how Tenet does. Tenet opened with $20 million.
That was
Labor Day weekend.
Did it open internationally though?
Yeah, it came out internationally. I don't know exactly what countries. I think it started opening in mid-August in some other countries. And that's when I was like, oh, it's actually opening. I wonder if it'll come to the United States, or maybe they'll hold it up. Maybe they'll hold off until 2021 for the US. And then all of a sudden, like I looked online and it was like Monday, like it was like the Monday before Labor Day weekend, it started screening in Reno.
Yeah.
I was like, what? Like, I totally shocked. Like, I thought it was at least another month away, if not longer. And so yeah, I was like, okay, this is happening. Like, it's opening. Like, technically before the end of the summer. I guess he like really wanted it to come out before fall, right? It's our summer movie season was one movie.
You know, he might do all right with it. So strangely enough, according to IMDb right now, worldwide gross, it's made 152 million.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you know, on a $205 million estimated budget plus whatever they spent in marketing, you know, it might not do as bad as a COVID times movie might be expected to do.
I mean, one thing I was thinking today, I was like, you know, it's like it's like the only movie out for a month. So maybe that'll actually get, you know, even if it's only 20 million, 18 million, 17, you know, like every weekend, like all of September, if you're going to the movies this month, you know, you have to go see Tenet. So
20 million a week will get you there.
You know, at the end of September, you're like, I want to go. Oh, I guess it's still just Tenet, so I guess we'll go see that. Yeah, I think it's going to do okay. It's not gonna be a box office disaster by any means, right? Like it'll bring in some money. It'll probably break even or make a little bit of profit. It just won't be the $1 billion success that some of his other films have. And not that it really should, or that it, you know, like I'm just watching this movie, like $200 million it's cost to make. It's crazy. Like half the film is people talking in rooms, and it's like some of the action is dazzling, and that freeway scene is amazing, but it's $200 million.
What got me the most after thinking about it for the last day is I really like the idea of that movie. I just think it wasn't done exactly correct because it is super confusing. It just like assumes
to me, I thought it was the most confusing movie of his career thus far, and I really didn't get a whole lot of Interstellars.
But I like the idea. I like the concept of the idea, and I this might be a spoiler if you haven't seen it, but the whole idea of the movie is that things in existence, in the future they've invented technology that allows things to go the opposite direction in time. Right?
It's another film about time.
Right. So mostly they're trying to figure out where ammunition has been reversed in time, and the main protagonist is trying to figure out where it's coming from and how to prevent a possible like doomsday event. Right. And as a concept, the idea of sending stuff back in time, I love. But it takes them so long to get to that point in the movie where you figure out where they're going to start playing around with time themselves, that I feel like they wasted too much setup, and they should have gotten to that point about halfway through the movie. And the second half of the movie should have all been them like going backwards and forwards in time, like kind of how Inception, you get to that point in Inception where it's a dream within a dream within a dream to like the really deep dream, and it's like, we can't push this idea any further, and then they do. I wish they would have done that with the idea of changing objects in time, and they could have I feel like there's some opportunities missed for just really doing the camera tricks that they do in the movie that wow you, and taking it to the whole next level. And I think that is just kind of bogged down possibly by too much exposition and story from the, I can't remember her name, but the female and
Yeah,
her
yeah.
son. That story was really, that took a big chunk of the movie. I think if you took
Mhm.
out that 40 minutes and reinvested it in the time swapping aspect, I think that would have been the superior film
Okay,
myself.
so you wanted it to be mostly about that time aspect and not so much about like the characters and because that for me, I was like most invested in, you know, the woman and her, you know, horrific husband played by Kenneth Branagh, who I've
Yeah.
been watching in movies my whole life. I've never seen him play a villain quite like that. I was very like like impressed by his performance in that movie. That was almost like Heath Ledger Joker level, like insanity psycho character. Like all of that material in the middle of the movie, I was really into. But like the lead character played by Washington, like I never really like got involved with his character or where he comes from or what he wants. You know, I was just kind of like he was just like you know
What's
he just
funny,
kind of manifesting the you know like the story was playing out in a way where I wanted to be more involved in those characters, and I could never really get invested in him. Did you were able to get invested in him?
no, I mean I like him mostly from the, what was it, the Black KKK,
Black Klansman was great.
Black
Yeah.
Klansman. I love that film, and I like him from that. But you can tell. Here's where I think your point's super valid. Is when you watch the end credits, his name literally is protagonist.
Protagonist.
His name in the end credits is protagonist. So that's how invested you should be with. Well,
Yeah.
the movie's going to need a protagonist. What are we going to call him? Call him the protagonist.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I didn't need him to have like a family life. I didn't need flashbacks to you know the girlfriend he used to have who passed away, or I didn't need that. But there was a coldness to his character. I was just never like you know, and it's like a human level. I felt like you needed a little bit more story to that character to get more involved in the action and everything. And so for me, it became after a while because I was so confused. In the first 20-30 minutes, it's just it moves so fast. You're like, what? Who is he? What's happening? It took me a while to kind of like get settled into the movie. I eventually just started admiring it for its cinematography and for its another great score and the action sequences. But even that last action sequence, the last 40 minutes of the movie, it goes on and on and on. And I'm like, if I had not gone up to use the restroom, I would have been really upset at that. I've been like, let's wrap it up, Chris. Let's get to the end here. You know, it's like Jesus.
yeah, no, that last scene was, again, it wasn't the right way to play with the concept of the time swap. You know, the beginning when they're in the lab and he's like pulling bullets out of the wall with the gun,
Yeah, that was
like
cool.
that was when I was like, ooh, this is a cool idea. Let's
Okay.
play with this idea more. And instead it just got noisy at the end. Like,
Mhm.
oh, call Michael Bay and let's blow something up, but in reverse. And
Yeah.
it's like, don't, no, 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 don't do that. That's a bad idea. You know, I honestly like, I thought Robert Pattinson's character might have been more three-dimensional by the end of it than
Yeah.
protagonist.
Yeah, his
What?
last scene, that last scene where he kind of says goodbye, right? Like when he's walking away, I thought that was a really good scene for him and
Yeah.
Robert Pattinson, who has had a you know kind of a unique career, and now he's doing the Batman movie with Matt Reeves, and then so obviously, you know, he just did The Lighthouse, which is like a really small black and white horror kind of horror film, and so he will go and do something that intrigues him as an actor. He's not going to you know join a project that you know just for the money. Like he has to be invested in the director and in the story that's being told. And yeah, I mean even his character was a little bit flat to me at times. Like I was like more involved with the female lead and Kenneth Branagh's character in some points of the movie more than the two male leads. But I mean it's one of those films, if you like Christopher Nolan's work, it's something you have to check out. I mean, you have to. I mean, it's one of those. I mean, I'm probably going to watch it again at some point just to see if I can make more sense of it on the second viewing. But even though I would put it like in the middle of his canon, you know, it wouldn't be. I wouldn't put it in the top 3 or 4 because you're right. It does play with some aspects of time that I thought were more successful in Memento and Inception than they are in Tenet.
Yeah. I I agree. It was, again, I would think you got to go see it right now because there's nothing else to see.
It's the only thing out, pretty much.
What are you going to do? Take the kids, go see Tenet.
Not a good one to take the kids.
No, don't take the kids. For sure, PG-13.
Yeah.
But, you know, if your kids are comfortable watching the 8 o'clock hour of most major network programming, you're probably fine seeing Tenet.
Yeah. But it, you know, no, even though I didn't love the film, it was still a thrill after 7 months of not being in a movie theater to finally go back to the movies again and to see an IMAX film shot on IMAX cameras by Christopher Nolan. That was a really great way to go back after 7 months.
I told you know, I think the last IMAX I might have seen was that last Godzilla movie where the Godzilla fights all the monsters, and I was like, oh, I want to see this on IMAX because it's going to be so big.
Yeah, we saw that together.
Yeah,
we saw that.
I think this movie to me
that was bad.
Yeah, Tenet though to me felt like a better film on IMAX than Godzilla did. It felt bigger. Like I never got that scale with Godzilla. Maybe it's just because it's so loud and noisy and CG heavy. But then in this film, when it's just a shot of the windmills on the ocean in IMAX and a boat going through there, it's so small compared to these giant windmills, like stuff like that. You know, it's why that is cool. Those are really cool, well done shots. Or even just like you said, the action scenes. You know, when there's a giant airliner crashing into a building on IMAX, and it clearly, I hope that was practical. It looked like
it's real, totally real.
Practical, and that just looks so good. It looks so good. It's worth it for that.
Yeah, and the sound quality all the way through. I've read some things that people were complaining about the sound design in the movie. I didn't that they couldn't hear dialogue. Like I didn't notice that watching it.
Yeah, that's just because they're talking so fast.
Yeah.
It wasn't the quality of the sound. They were just talking fast.
Yeah. Some of the scenes move really quickly, and you have to pay very close attention. As is the case with pretty much every Christopher Nolan movie. You can't like zone out for 5 minutes. Like you have to like closely pay attention to everything happening, or you'll be very lost. But especially in Tenet. All right. Anything else you want to add to? We've touched on all of his films. He just turned 50, so here's hoping for another 20 plus years of Christopher Nolan movies, right?
Yeah, I mean, based on his track record, his next one should be awesome.
So it's back and forth.
Yeah, the next one's going to be a home run for sure. Like it's going to be amazing. I just know it.
And I'll be curious to see, will he ever revisit like a comic book film? Will he ever do a film based on, a lot of his films as of late have been kind of original stories. I'll be curious to see if he ever goes back to like, a property, even whether it's a novel form or a comic book, like if he'll ever go back to something like that, would be curious to see if there's a year where he's like, I've got nothing else. I've got no ideas. I'm going to go to this property. And like, I would see it, I'd be curious to see what he does. So. Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and thank you, Brandon, for joining me on this special features episode of Film at 50, talking about Chris Nolan, and hope to have you back soon.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for being here. That was fun. Yeah, it was fun. We haven't done this in a while. This is fun.